Hello and welcome to Lion and Mouse Commentary. I'm Tori and this is my best friend Holland.
Hello.
If you're new to our show, we rank various forms of entertainment by different categories out of a total score of 10, with only 2 points allotted for our personal taste. Don't worry, we'll break everything down for you as we go. Feel free to agree, disagree, or just find something new to enjoy. And be sure to tread lightly, there will be spoilers ahead. Cut to the intro. Okay, so today I chose the Princess Diaries for us to review. This is familiar to me. I actually don't know. Is it familiar to you as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just making sure.
Yeah.
I never asked, so I realized.
Yeah.
But if this is new to you, here is some spoiler-free background. Spoiler-free background. The Princess Diaries is a film released August 3rd, 2001. It was directed by Gary Marshall. The screenplay was by Gina Windcoast, and it was based on the 2000 novel by Meg Cabot. It was produced by Mario Iskovich, Deborah Martin Chase, and Whitney Houston.
Is it really that Whitney Houston, though?
It is really that Whitney Houston.
The Whitney Houston?
The Whitney Houston produced this movie.
Huh.
I learned that
Who
while
knew?
prepping for this. A total running time of 115 minutes. They had a budget of $26 million, and they made lots of profit because their box office was $165.3 million.
Nice.
It stars Anne Hathaway. This is considered her breakout role. Julie Andrews, Hector Elizondo, Heather Matarazzo, Mandy Moore, and Caroline Goodall. And the Google synopsis, which I always find the Google synopsises to be kind of funny, so I'm going to read that one. Shy San Francisco teenager Mia Thermopolis is thrown for a loop when from out of the blue she learns the astonishing news that she's a real-life princess. As the heir apparent to the crown of the small European principality of Genovia, Mia begins a comical journey toward the throne when her strict and formidable grandmother, Queen Clarice Rinaldi, shows up to give her princess lessons. So that is the facts. So, Holland, do you want to go ahead and kick us off with our first category?
Sure. I just think that, okay, first of all, plot note, they call it a principality of Genovia. It's not like a country, like a principality, and the castle at the end is that large for a tiny little principality.
I think
it's
supposed to be, I think it's a country. I don't know why Google said principality. That
I'm just saying,
strange.
it's a little, that castle at the end is pretty impressive.
Uh-huh.
All right, so our first category, I'll go ahead and start. Plot and story delivery for movies has a total possible score of 2. I gave this plot 1 out of 2 points. I feel like I have not seen a ton of Gary Marshall's films, but I feel like this film is like classic Gary Marshall. And it's in the sense that it's pretty predictable. It's very much designed to like tug at your heartstrings and be a really like feel good movie, and it's definitely a chick flick, but it's not necessarily negative that it is all of those things. But I think it's overall the plot's really formulaic in a sense, but I think that in its time it was very It wasn't as like tropey or stereotypical as what we see in films now. So that's kind of like my little disclaimer for the plot, because I think that it's easy to look at a lot of the plot points and be like, oh my gosh, this is almost eye-rollingly predictable and it's just cringeworthy because how many times have we seen this kind of trope or plot point? And in its time in 2001, this was pretty... I wouldn't say that it was new. I feel like there's some things that were kind of tropey even in 2001, but it's not nearly as inundated into media as it is today. So I tried to be a little balanced in my assessment of the plot. Some positives. I do think that I timed it because I was really curious how they were going to I was surprised at how quickly they establish all the characters and all the main cast as we go. It takes 4 minutes for you to meet every character, get a little snapshot of who they are, and kind of figure out whether or not you like them and kind of how they integrate into the life of Mia as the main character. And so I think it's great establishing narrative to kind of give you the little snapshots without having overly verbose exposition. It's literally during the beginning credits of this movie, which I think is done really well. We know who we like, we know who to follow, we know who our main character is. There is a lot of expositional dialogue at the beginning to kind of like establish what has happened to these characters, because we're picking up in the middle of their life. We didn't have a narrator fill us in on anything. And overall, I would say that kind of dialogue feels relatively organic in this film, whereas a lot of films with the expositional dialogue, it feels like, now I'm going to tell you everything that's happened, and almost feels like they're breaking the fourth wall because of how expositional the dialogue is. I do think there are a ton of tropes, though, even in that first opening credits. And I wrote some of them down. The fact that our main character is this like quirky, clumsy girl who's like an outsider character. She has an eccentric best friend who's a little on the wacky side. The mean girls are the cheerleaders at the high school. There's this popular boy who's like a show off, and he's like relatively good looking, and he's, but he's cocky and overconfident. He's the popular boy that is the subsequent love interest for the main character. There's a character that's this like the character of Jeremiah is introduced like in the opening credits. He's like this kind of nerd. He's like sitting on a laptop. He's nerdy looking. He's got red hair. So he's like eccentric as like a potential friend / love interest for the best friend, who's also like an outsider. The best friend's brother is in a band, and he's the like, will they, won't they love interest for the main character. The mom is like this quirky artist who, somehow can afford an insane real estate rent in San Francisco and private school tuition for her daughter I know. I
was going to say that's addressed. It is addressed. It's not Helen.
I know. We do find out later that it was her dad who paid for her tuition, but introducing her, we don't know that. They go to a private school. And then they have a grumpy neighbor who's like a little nosy and just like, and then
Robitussin.
Yeah,
which makes me think like it's such a perfect name, because to me Robitussin is cough medicine.
Yeah.
So I just think it's a fun name.
I think to everybody it's a cough medicine.
Oh, okay.
And then all the school faculty are like, they're not like the bumbling idiots tropes, but they kind of like don't pay a lot of attention to the main character. They seem overall like, they're trying to keep the peace among the students, and, all of those characters are introduced and has set up the narrative for our like plot. Like every single one of those is a trope. It's all been way overdone, especially at this point in film, especially in like tween teen chick flicks. But like I said, it is, on a positive note, it is a really good way to kind of establish our characters, and we get to know them really well and kind of know what we're in for. It sets up what we're expecting out of this movie, and then it delivers. I think that in general, the plot kind of maintains that like very predictable, stereotypical kind of story. It's like the ugly duckling kind of plot trope, if you will, that here Mia is. She's this like quirky outsider, like girl that nobody knows or likes, and she doesn't really care that nobody knows or likes her. And then, oh, surprise, you're a princess, person of like that will have like power and influence, and like, congratulations, it was a secret the whole time. And that overall is a pretty conventional, like overdone plot. It's extremely predictable. She has this kind of moment where does she want to, accept that as her, new life, or does she not? Like, what does that mean to her? Like, how does that change her relationship with her family and like her mom? And she meets this grandmother and has princess lessons. And I mean, all of that is just so predictable. the whole part with like kind of the third act breakup where she has this like with the beach party and everything, and it's like, oh well, we've decided that you're just not cut out for this, so, and your friends don't like you, and you know, this kind of third act breakup, if you will, and then she like rises above it and everything's, you know, big happy ending at the end. She gets the boy, and I mean, it's just like she finds out that these people, that the popular girls are really not her friends, and you know, I mean, it's just like she learns her lesson and like everybody has a happy, it's so predictable. But what it sets out to do with this like very predictable stereotypical plot, I think that the way it delivers it is just very genuine and organic. And I think that there's some positive to that. It's not done in a way that feels like a parody, or it feels like they just made the movie out of a cash grab. The time and attention given to, and I'll talk about this a little bit in characters as well, but the time and attention given to framing these characters for us, framing the events, making it feel like these are real people, that these are real things happening to them, and the way that the events of the film kind of unfold as we go feels like it was done with a lot of love in the people that made this film. And because of that, we have buy-in to that all of this is real and all these people's reactions to these scenarios are sincere and genuine. And so that's kind of the big wide lens that I kind of gave this half credit, because yeah, it's really predictable, but what this film sets out to do, it did it well. It wasn't trying to like give you this twist plot ending or give this arch nemesis and bring this arch nemesis into the story, or, you know, have this princess find out she has superpowers. I mean, it's not trying to like do anything big and wild and crazy or try to be unexpected. And I think in this day and age, that's a really strong positive. It's just set out to tell this story, and this is the story that it was told. I will say I did not read. Did you read the original novel?
I have read half of the original series. I borrowed them from the library when I was a kid, so I don't own them. I think there are 6 or 7 books in the series, and I think I read the first 3. There are quite a few differences. I personally, growing up, this is one of the few times I'll say this, that I actually preferred this movie over the books. I felt like the books were really trivial, and they lacked the heart that a lot of this movie does. So that's my personal experience with the books, and again, I haven't finished the series, but
yeah, I remember hearing like around the time this film came out, and even like later on into, you know, years after, that people had read the books and that the books were very different and that the characters were very different. Like the dynamic between Mia and her grandmother were very different. So I can't speak to that because I haven't personally read it. I did find a couple of like weird, quirky plot holes, but I think that that's kind of comes with the territory of a movie of this nature, but I'll still touch on them. I don't understand why Mia goes to visit her grandmother, who is, we've established, is visiting from Genovia, and she just has a mansion in San Francisco, just like owns one. Like, yeah. Is that the U.S. Embassy for Genovia is located in? It doesn't say that, but
it does.
Is that
Charlotte says that?
Oh, she says
she says that this is the Genovian consulate that's located in San Francisco.
Gotcha. So. When she goes to visit the mansion, that was a question I had of why is the Genovia's Independence Day ball not in Genovia? Why is it in America?
That's a good question.
In their embassy, I guess.
And I also don't know why they would pick San Francisco of all places. Unless it was like a sister city to like the capital of Genovia or something. I don't know. Yeah. You know how there's like random sister cities located around the world? It's like, oh, we're a sister city to random town Austria or something, you know? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, so that I didn't understand why the Genovia Independence Day ball is in San Francisco. The annual one, it's not like it's some random one-off thing. I don't understand why Mia goes to visit the mansion though, and she like pushes the button, and the security is like, name, and she says Clarice Rinaldi, and he's like, okay, come on in. when somebody says name, shouldn't you say your name to
she's
identify
dumb
yourself?
And 15 and has probably never been in a situation like that. So she says, I'm here to visit my grandmother. And he says name. So she must think he's asking, what is your grandmother's name? That's why she gives that answer.
But that's terrible security measures. Like, she could have been anyone.
I think it's a funny part because I'm like, oh, Mia, you're just so naive and like sheltered. You've never had to deal with this situation before. But it is bad on the security.
It's a bad security maneuver.
He's just like, oh, okay.
And then the pat down of the backpack was just like, you're good.
They didn't even look inside of it.
I know. But I guess this was pre 9/11, so, you know, security measures were different back then. It's like TSA. The dinner scene, I will say for plot, I find it even more like eye rolling as like time goes by. The whole scene where she's like having the dinner and like drops the whatever on the floor and somebody trips over that. It's so like over the top. It's not even funny, I think. I to an extent. Funny. I mean, if you've never seen the film before, you probably will think it's funny. But I also think if you've never seen the film before and your only reference is modern films, it feels like you're watching a little kid's TV show a little bit. I think that aspect was just a little like way too over the top. It's like, this is too much klutz. Nobody is this clumsy. It's like, what, we don't have to establish that Mia's this clumsy. We already can kind of get that. I do like in the plot where it's about halfway through, where right before the dinner, actually, when Joe is talking to Mia about you know, she's basically saying she doesn't think that she's cut out for this. And he says, you just have to simply try. That's how she says, how do I know if I'm cut out for this or something like that? And he says, by simply trying. And I like that that's kind of the turning point for Mia a little bit, where she's like, all right, well, I'm just going to give it a try. And I like that that's about halfway through the film. Mm-hmm. And so we don't wait till like the very end and then have like a rushed ending at the end. Mm-hmm. We have this kind of back and forth for Mia where we get to kind of watch her grow and struggle and not know if she even wants to try. And then that's kind of, it sounds really simple, but that's kind of the turning point for her, is Joe's encouragement to her to just simply give it a try. That's how you know if you're made for this or not, if you're cut out for this or not. I did like that, and I clocked it too. I was just curious. I was like, how far are we into the movie? And it was literally like 53 minutes and the movie's about 2 hours. So it was about halfway. And I like that Joe also has the opportunity to kind of encourage Mia that the queen knows that she's ready, and that that is kind of, it's very relational, in addition to the fact that like this is all circumstances happening to her as well. The beach scene as well, I think, is really problematic. It didn't age very well. And I know that in this day and age, I feel like you could kind of I feel like if that was made in a movie today, it would be extremely controversial. But in 2001, people just kind of accepted this as just like a part of a plot. I don't know. I don't understand why Mia is like fully clothed and she's like, I have to go change. And then she changes in a changing tent. And that's what like is this big scandal of the beach party, is that she was literally changing and then somebody flipped the tent over, and photographers just think, oh, this is perfectly fine to just take photos of a minor that's changing on the beach. Yeah. Like, that's extremely problematic. I mean,
straight to jail.
I think completely. Like, this is illegal.
Yeah.
And everybody's response is to be mad at Mia for putting herself in this situation. I think that just did not age well at all. I don't know. But even still, like in 2001, what were they thinking? Like when they made this, that like, this doesn't even make that much sense, that like, we're going to get mad at a literal child for trusting her peers to like let her change in a changing tent.
I feel like that's a reasonable thing to trust your peers to do.
Right.
Even if you're not close to them. So yeah, I understand.
So, I think though that even though it's kind of problematic, I feel like in the 2000s, like late 90s, early 2000s, when this film was being developed and came out, that's pretty accurate to tabloid culture. So I think it's kind of a snapshot of the time that kind of stuff happened to people all the time, and like creating tabloid buzz and paparazzi taking photos of people. Like, those are the kinds of things that were being done and published, and the results of that kind of situation that Mia experienced, like, real people experienced similar backlash for something that really wasn't their fault and was out of their control. So in a sense, I can say, like, they definitely would not be able to put that in a movie today. I think it really is true that of what happened in that time period. I think overall, other kind of positives with the plot, though, is I like that the display of how kids at school can change when they find out about Mia's secret, and the way that they treat her differently, and they can kind of get their 5 minutes of fame, or the way the cheerleaders are like saying, oh yeah, we're best friends, like things like that, I think are really accurate. It's a pretty accurate portrayal. I also like the way that the conflict between Mia and her grandmother and Mia and her mom, and with Lily and Michael and the whole like core group of characters, that way that all of that conflict is resolved. I think it's a little corny when she like gives them the pizza with M&Ms on it or whatever. That's a little cheesy. But
because it's a pizza.
Puns. But I think overall, the way the conflict is resolved was handled really well. I think that you could very easily resolve the conflict by just having everybody just like, oh, it's water under the bridge, let's just accept it and move on. But I think they handle it in a pretty mature way. And that the way that Mia accepts her position in the end is not because like, oh, okay, I want to be a princess for selfish reasons, or I should do this to make my dad happy. I feel like that would have been a really easy way out, is like, I should, do what my dad wants me to do. And instead she sees it as this kind of opportunity to affect a positive change. And I think that I'll talk about it in characters too, but I think that overall is a really good kind of message, especially for the audience that this film is intended for, which I would say is generally younger, tween girls. And I think that having that be the motivation, instead of like, there's no handsome prince, there's no like magical, fairy tale ending. And yet it's also not an overly like politically charged, like, revolutionary cause to get behind. It's just an individual making the decision to kind of step into a more mature position in her life and moving forward with that. So there's some positives and negatives, I think, throughout kind of the plot as a whole. But I think in general, even though it's like super predictable and it's almost parodied in some like, memes and films and, stuff has become a little overdone, and some of the tropes of the plot and characters have been, they're not seen as inventive or new as they were maybe when this film was released. I think that overall this film delivers the plot to you with a lot of heart, and so that's why I give it half point, 1 out of 2.
Okay. All right, so for me, for plot and story delivery out of 2 points, I gave it 1.5 points. I agree with a lot of what you said. I think for me, though, it's just the negatives are just less of a problem in my eyes. And so that's, I think, where that little discrepancy comes from. But I agree that the plot overall is very predictable and formulaic. There's really no such thing as a plot twist in this entire story, and I think that's okay. I think that the plot really, comparatively to some things that we have talked about on this podcast, I feel like this is probably one of the most simple plots that we've covered, but I don't think in any way that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it still has a great level of fun to it, a great level of humor. It's still interesting in its core, which, I don't think that something necessarily has to be complex to be interesting. I think that it is entertaining in all of the ways that it should be. And honestly, I want to give credit to the dialogue and writing. I think so much of this dialogue, and maybe this bleeds over a little bit into characters because it's acted so well, but I think so much of the dialogue, it just feels so, number one, natural, and number two, delivered in such a believable, acceptable way that even the more ridiculous characters sometimes, and even some of the more ridiculous dialogue, it all kind of fits that person, that moment, that context. And while I think overall this story is meant to be like sort of upbeat, lighthearted, fun, entertaining, there are still these moments of depth that we get, and we get to see true growth in mostly, I think, our two main characters being Mia and Clarice. I think they're the characters that we see the most growth in different ways. I'll talk about that a little more in characters. I don't want to bleed too much, but I do think that these points, while kind of lay in two different categories, are very, very closely connected. So that's why I wanted to kind of talk about that.
Well, I think the plot in general is very character driven.
That's exactly my point.
Because the plot, you know, you could say it's the trope of like an ugly duckling plot, but I think there's also kind of a quote unquote trope of like where the protagonist finds their identity.
Yes.
And so that's a very character heavy plot to move.
Exactly. That was my segue, in that I think, from my perspective, that this story focuses less on the princess lessons thing. That's sort of, in a way, kind of like the subplot or B plot. And I think there are other subplots underneath that too. But I think the main plot is watching a 15-year-old girl go from being perfectly content to being invisible. Mia has this line where she says, "My intention in life is to be invisible, and I am good at it." And so watching her go from that to sort of taking this news, processing it, coping with that, and adapting to it, and coming out on the other side as a much more mature, less self-focused, confident young girl. I think that's really, if I were to summarize the entire plot into one thing, I think it's really that. It's Mia's journey. And I think that Clarice's journey in the plot, it almost is like they're two sides of a coin, and they figure out how to meet in the middle about a lot of things. And so it's Clarice's journey learning how to be not just a queen, but a grandmother. Since it's established very early in the story that Clarice has not really been present in Mia's life, and you learn that that's kind of the choice of Mia's mom and dad when he was living, was that, you know, it might overcomplicate. I don't think I necessarily agree with their decisions, but that's neither here or there. But the idea is that, you know, it could complicate her life if we were to try to incorporate her into the royal family at this point. So I think because of that, Clarice has not had the opportunity, yes, Mia has not had the opportunity to have a grandmother in that capacity, but Clarice has not had the opportunity to have a granddaughter. And so she, at the beginning of the movie, her connection with Mia is strictly, you are the person who is going to take the throne from me. That's it. That's their common bond. And through the movie, we get to see that through circumstances and just both of them really trying to do the right thing, not just for each other, but for the future of the country. And that's really their goal, you know, is what is the best thing to do here. Like, we get to see the growth of Clarice. She softens while Mia sort of grows up. Like, I don't want to say toughens up, but in a way she does. She has to toughen herself, you know, her just shyness and cowardice in crowds, and to like take responsibility for anything. Like, so while Mia is toughening, we get to see Clarice softening. And you know, I'm really not trying to take away from characters that I'm going to talk about, but I do think that this is the crux of the plot here, is to see the parallel between them and how at the end they meet in the middle, and there's true like affection there now. And it's family and not just a transactional sort of plot anymore. Now there's family at stake and things like that. And I just, for one, think that's great. I think it's lovely. I don't think it has to be hard to follow for us to get there. And I think the way that they deliver and package that is just so nicely concise, without missing any of the fun levity that we get from sort of this chick flick comedy. But I definitely don't think it's perfect. I personally am not a big fan of the romance subplots between, I understand that some people could probably argue and say, well, these are, realistic things that teenagers go through. And that's true. But I think it kind of muddies the plot in some ways. I kind of understand that, like, Josh inviting Mia to the beach party is kind of like the third act breakup, kind of like you mentioned. But you could argue and say it could have just been Lana and her friends that invited her to the beach party, and a very similar situation could have happened. Josh didn't really, like, he wasn't really necessary. And I think that her, like, crush on Josh, while it could have been mentioned in passing, I think it's just made out to be a little bit too much. On the flip side of that, sure, I think Michael is obviously, like, the more logical, like, romantic choice for Mia. But even in that, I felt like some of it felt like a little bit too forced. And it really just didn't need to be there. I think that Mia could have kept her relationship with Michael to be platonic, and it really wouldn't have made any difference in the long run. Because you can hurt your friends too. Yeah. And she hurt Lily and has to, apologize for that and all of that. So I just think that this, like, romance triangle that they bring in is just a little bit to be desired. There's a little bit to be desired there.
I think I would agree.
I think that the more interesting romance subplot is this chemistry that's very obvious between Clarice and Joe. And I just think that's a more, like, interesting one. But it doesn't doesn't have anything really to do with the plot. It doesn't affect anything or change motivations of any characters. I think the biggest trope for me that I was kind of like about is and I think this was very popular. At least I remember a couple other movies, at least one other movie around this time frame that did this same thing. It's the letter from dead parent that changes the course of the main character's decision trope. That is
so true.
And it's like,
that's so true.
This was, I don't know if Princess Diaries did it first, but I do know that there are other movies of this same type, which is kind of like the tween comedy, like, heartfelt, like, but funny movie that was very popular in, like, the early to mid 2000s. That's like, oh, I can't do this. Like, I just can't do this. It can't be me. I tried. I failed. And then it's like, we stumble upon the letter from my dead parent.
Yep.
And it's like, I have to do this for them. And I don't think it's necessarily, like, a bad motivation. I don't want to make it sound like I think it's so contrived. I just think it is slightly contrived.
But I think that's one thing. I think the letter, I agree. I think it's kind of an eye-rolling trope. But I do like that her motivation wasn't, I have to do it for Dad.
Right.
Because it's what he always wanted.
But it changed her mind.
It did. It did.
So it still affected the trajectory of Mia's motivation or even decision at that moment, which her decision was, which she says she's going to run away to Colorado. And I was watching this the other night and I was like, what's in Colorado?
Rocks.
How you going?
She said she was going to do rock climbing.
How you going to get there? You're 15 and your car don't even work in San Francisco.
She legally can't drive.
True. So
she almost got arrested for driving without a license.
So how she planned to get there?
She was going to drive there. She got in her car.
So that's maybe the worst decision that Mia makes in the whole movie is that moment right there.
I was gonna mention this in characters, but I think it's even more ridiculous. All of that, yes. But I think it's also an atrocity that her whole reason for running away is because she doesn't want to make a speech.
I know. Yeah, it is. It's a little too much.
That's the reason?
And it's like, even...
I'm going to run away from home because I don't want to give a speech.
Right. And eventually she gets there, and it's kind of funny because she makes the decision, spur of the moment. Also, when Joe and Helen and Clarice realize that, like, she's kind of duped them, and now she's going to run away. And so everybody's scrambling, and, you know, there's a lot of like high energy in this like scramble for the last second. And eventually Joe finds her. She gets there. It's fine. She gives the speech. So it all ends the way it should. But I just keep thinking to myself, like, if you had been successful, like, what's the long-term goal here, ma'am?
Mhm.
Because if it's like, I don't want to give a speech, I feel like a 15-year-old living on her own is a little scarier than
giving a speech.
You're gonna have to talk to some people eventually.
True.
Especially when they put out a missing child report.
Right, and this was before social media, so it's not like, you know, I'm gonna run away and... So...
Anyway, I do think that I do like Mia's final speech. I think it kind of ties back to like my dialogue note. I just think it's written really well. I think that it could have been very self-serving, self-focused kind of speech, or it could have gone the other way and been like, I'm doing this for my dad who's dead and I have to honor his memory. And like, I'm just really glad that they didn't do either. And they kind of, it does give a good view of like the growth. It's a really big comparison to Mia at the beginning of the movie. And, you know, and if you've watched other episodes, listened to us talk about other things of media, like, I think that's one of my biggest complaints is when a character is not the same or is the same as they were at the beginning. And that is absolutely not the case in this story. And I think it's just super evident. And I think that, like you said, the way that everything sort of resolves, every wrong is kind of made right. And while some of it is kind of goofy and silly and like, oh, okay, we could, you know, saw that coming with a 10-foot pole, and the bad guys, which are not really bad, they're just, you know, mean teenagers. It's like, but even those people, they kind of get their comeuppance in the way, and they get their own slice of embarrassment pie or whatever. And so you end the movie feeling satisfied. Mm-hmm. And I think while I'm not looking for anything super deep or poignant or philosophical, like, I got this plot, it did everything it was supposed to do, and at the end I felt pleased that I'd watched the movie, and I think that's really the best thing that you can ask of any movie of this caliber. So with the small what's going on right now moments, why did we make this decision, this is why I gave it 1.5 points out of 2.
Cool. You said that you could see this coming with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, my 10-foot pole got eyes.
You mixed your anachronisms up a little bit there.
Whoops. Sorry.
For our non-English speakers,
yeah,
we mess it up too.
There's probably people who are like, you know, English is like a second or third language, and they're probably like, I don't know. I don't know expression.
I don't know that.
I'm sorry, I messed that all up.
No, it's okay. I just thought it was funny. Mm-hmm. So, all right, our next category is characters. Out of a total possible score of 3, I gave this 1.5 points out of 3. I will say, I almost gave it 1 out of 3 until the very end of the movie, and then I was like, all right, that's worth half a point. A lot of my character notes are some things that you already touched on, okay. Especially with Clarice and Mia and how their relationship with each other changed. I wrote almost the exact same things that you did. As far as, you know, Mia is learning from Clarice, Clarice is learning from Mia. They're both learning how to kind of get along with each other, but yet they're both gaining a grandparent and a granddaughter at the same time. So it's more than just, this lady is teaching me how to be royal. Like you said, I think that takes kind of the back seat. And what we're really watching is this very character-driven story between the two of them. But some general notes for characters I have. I think the casting in this movie is exceptional. It's just absolutely fabulous. I think Julie Andrews alone cast as the queen, I don't think you could ever. Julie Andrews is a national treasure. International treasure. Yeah. I'm going to say it right now. It's true.
I'm going to say it right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We love you, Julie Andrews, if you see this.
Come be on our podcast.
Oh my gosh, please.
That would never happen.
I would freak out.
I would, yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how I would react to that. I'd be so stunned.
The whole time.
Yes, but Julie Andrews is absolutely perfect. And she is so lovely as the queen. And she does such a good job of balancing this very, like, kind person on the inside, and yet the shell that we see on the outside is, I have a job to do. This is my job. Like, I have a responsibility and a job. I have a country that I'm supposed to take care of. I do have a family I'm supposed to take care of, but initially we watch that perspective she has under the umbrella of, I have a country to take care of. And then we see her role as a family member to Mia change and kind of come to the forefront of, while she never compromises that that responsibility and what's the word I'm looking for? Duty that she has to her country. So, and she balances that so well. Julie Andrews does such a great job balancing that. I think the chemistry between her and Anne Hathaway is just unmatched. I mean, it's so rare that you see two people on screen and you feel like they've known each other their whole lives, and it's just magical, the chemistry they have.
Did you know
on
Anne
stage.
Hathaway was 17 when she did that movie?
Yeah.
And I can't imagine being 17 and being pitted head to head with Julie Andrews and being able to hold my own. She did impeccable.
She did a great job. She really does a fantastic job. I think the casting for all the other characters are also really good, and they're all so believable. Every character, whether it's the neighbor Mr. Robitussin or Julie Andrews, as the queen, or even like Jeremiah and Mandy Moore's character, like all of them have so much conviction as to who they are. You believe every single one of them that this character is who this person is. None of them feel like, and I feel like this might be a commentary on film, like the film industry. None of them feel like actors portraying a character. And I feel like in films, a lot more modern films, when you watch somebody on a screen, you get the vibe, if you will, while you're watching it, that I'm watching, I'm just picking an actor's name. I'm watching Chris Hemsworth pretend to be Thor, or I'm watching,
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Kristen Stewart pretending to be Bella Swan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's refreshing to see this cast, who most of them at the time were complete unknowns.
Yeah.
And you believe every single one of them. The believability of this cast is so good. From it's Sandra Oh as the vice principal.
Yep.
I believe it.
Yeah,
I believe it. She is the vice principal, and her character is just classic. It's so funny. Her use of like comedic timing is just hysterical. That was my note about her. I just think she's hilarious. She uses her screen time very well. She's also a very
I don't have any notes about her, so I'm just going to tack on here. She's a very physical actor. Not to say that I think she is over the top, but she is just physical enough that we just 100%, she sells it 100%.
Well, I was going to say, in regards to that, especially, like, she's so intentional that there is this level of physicality with her character that just makes her so believable. Like, I think that she is a vice principal of a school and not, an actress.
Yeah.
But I also agreed with a lot of what you said about the growth of these characters. I think there's a lot of growth. We watch them grow in their bond with each other. This like familial affection for each other grows, and then I think this is what I wrote. The intellect that they gain from each other. It's not just a feelings based relationship that they have where they grow in their affection. And it's also, like you said, it's not a transactional based relationship where they only are gaining like intellectually learning things from each other. We watch them grow in both of those areas. And so I think there is a lot of growth in the characters, in our kind of two main characters. There's a lot of depth in what they understand of each other. And even just in small moments, I think that this kind of goes into like how you mentioned it in plot. Even in just very small moments, we're given these snapshots of what's going on inside their heads that gives them more depth of character than just, this clumsy, quirky, not like other girls main character. We see that she has, intelligence and the questions that she asks her grandmother about, who she is and how she thinks through things. It shows us that, Mia cares a lot about and is really processing through this whole life event that she's experiencing. There is a little bit of that trope with Mia, this like, I'm not like other girls, and she's clumsy and she doesn't want to be noticed, and that she, I think it's overused now, maybe not at the time of the film, but I think it's overused now that we're going to give power to the least likely person. So the event of the kind of the chosen hero is going to go to this person who's a nobody from nowhere who actually doesn't want the power, and so although that makes for an interesting plot, it's very overused character trope. But I think that the way that she has this developed in her feels very organic. I like that we watch her mature. She does make mistakes, kind of like, I think Joe maybe says it in the film, like she makes the kind of mistakes that like any teenager would make. So it's very believable that she's not this like wise beyond her years teenager. She just makes these mistakes and she hurts the people that she cares about, but then she learns from it. She tries to rectify her wrongs and she grows past it. One of the reasons that I gave the turning point of giving this from a 1 out of 3 points to 1.5 points out of 3 is I really did think that the motivation for her accepting the crown was actually done really well. I think it would have been very easy, kind of like we already talked about, for me to say, oh, I'm going to do it for my dad because I read his letter and it's what he would have wanted and this is my destiny. I feel like that's a very empty and hollow reason to do something, is like, it's my destiny, it's what I was meant to do, because that's not necessarily going to sustain you. And I think that the kind of end speech at the end, although it does seem a little kind of corny in parts, I think that her kind of culmination statement that the thoughts of my thoughts and the thoughts of people smarter than me can become, reality, and I can affect change. And I think that shows a level of maturity in her that we've watched her kind of grow throughout this film. And I think it's a very positive, thing to see, but I think it also shows a level of maturity that she realizes it's not that I'm this kind of teenage rebel and I want to change the world by, I don't know, save the whales. It's like, or, like Lily's, hundreds of causes that she has in the film, but she's like, my opinions, but also the opinions of people that are smarter than me can be used in positive ways. And so I think that, is a great reason to take on a huge responsibility of running a country. So I thought that was very, very well done. I think it's, I kind of already touched on most of my notes from Julie Andrews. I thought she was great. I like how we watch her kind of soften as the film goes. She's very believable as a queen. She's kind of the straight man of the relationship, and I think she does it very well, but we never see this... we never see any unkindness in her, which I think then gives us reason to believe that she really does care for Mia as her grandmother. And I like that what she sees in Mia is herself. That moment where she talks about how what I see in you, I saw in another person a long time ago. And I'm just paraphrasing here. And what you expect her to say.
She says, I see the same spirit in you as somebody else I know. And Mia says, oh, who? And she says, me.
And we expect her to say, your dad.
Right.
But she doesn't. She says, me. And I just think that's such a great moment of connection between the two of them. And I think it humanizes both of them as characters. So I think that was done really well. I kind of already mentioned it. I think it's extremely out of left field that Mia runs away because she's going to give a speech. I think that's one of the biggest parts of the story where I'm like, what the heck? This is so out of left field for the character of Mia. I think it doesn't make any sense. The rest of my notes for the characters are not as positive as what I've covered already. So, which is why I did not give this full points for characters. Every other character is basically a trope. They're all basically cookie cutter, came straight out of, the formula for a tween rom-com coming of age story, like, plug and play. Go, here's your main characters. And so that was the biggest reason, although I commend the actor's ability to make all of those believable and feel as organic as possible. At the end of the day, to be objective, they are still extremely tropey. Lana and the Lynette's, I think they walked so that Regina George could fly. Here's your original kind of Mean Girls. They even look like the Mean Girls. Don't we have like 2 blondes and a brunette there?
We do.
I'm just saying.
Ooh.
I think, we had a little bit of, and I double checked the dates because Mean Girls didn't come out till 2004.
Correct. So
that's my theory on that. I'll just drop the mic here.
Mandy Moore's like,
right.
Yeah.
I think that Michael is ridiculous as a character. I think it's a little cute at the beginning when he's talking to the guy that owns the car mechanic, how the car mechanic pinpoints that he must be sweet on Mia to do like work for free or whatever. But then it's like he asks Mia if they can, fix something on her car, which then her car afterwards works. I forgot about that plot hole. Then her car seems to work. And
I think the assumption is that Michael just works on it by himself.
Yeah, but then her car drove beforehand or after. There was like a repair that happened, and then the car broke again, and then the car car just flipped back and forth between being fixed or not fixed based on what the plot needed.
Yeah.
But anyways, he literally says he wants to work on the car and like eat pizza or whatever, and Mia point blank asks him like a date, and he's like, no. And then she gives him a heads up that she's gonna make other plans and she'll get with him later, and he's like, yeah, that's fine. And then he shows up at her house all mad that she blew him off.
Yeah,
like,
it's a little immature.
No, it doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's just inconsistent and it doesn't make sense. And so I think that it's a little ridiculous that this is what we have set up to be this huge moment of betrayal, and he deserves this pizza apology with M&M's on it. And I want to know what pizza employee had to spell out, I'm sorry, with colored M&M's. Where do you even get M&M's at a pizza place? But anyways.
They went out to the 7-Eleven and bought some for this special order.
Yep. I think that, and then Mia gets in a bad situation with the whole beach bash thing. She's clearly in a lot of trouble and distress, and she's like, everybody's making fun of her at school, and then he just gets petty about it. And we're supposed to think he's the love interest that's like, oh, you've been there for me all along.
Yeah.
Like, no, he's a menace. Also, who is a menace is Mia's mom. She is a menace for lying to her daughter. And I like that Mia calls her out on it. Mm-hmm. She lies to her. And then she basically is like, oh, yeah, well, I dated him and we knew he was royal and we got married and I got pregnant. And then I decided, yeah, I don't really want to be royal anymore. So I quit. And we decided to just not tell you. And I think that's ridiculous. You shouldn't do that to your child.
Yeah.
And also keep your child away from her dad for all these years. So she's a menace. And I also think Lily is a menace as well. I have
some notes about Lily. I have an actual like question to pose when I get there.
I think first off, she's a menace when she's like she talks about her dad, and Mia's like, well, at least you have a dad. And Lily says, hey, you haven't gotten over that? That was 2 months ago already.
I know.
Excuse you.
That's like no time at all. It'd be one thing if she was like, it's been 12 years, but like 2 months?
2 months.
I sometimes grieve my pets longer than that.
Yeah, most people do. And like, here's her dad that she never got to meet, and she is also grieving the fact that he's dead and probably grieving the fact that she never will get to meet him. And Lily's response is, "You're not over that by now? That was 2 months ago." Menace. She's a menace. Mm-hmm. I also think that Mia's dad is a menace, and that's my hot take, because I hate that we try and make him out to be this great dude because he wrote a letter and he sent her presents, so he clearly was in contact with her. He sent her all these presents, and then he writes a letter and it has this like sentimental sap about being brave, and it's like, well, why weren't you the brave guy and took your responsibilities? And exactly. So you're not one to talk, and I don't care how many times this movie tries to sell me that he's this great guy. He's not. He's a menace.
Yeah.
So there's too many menaces in this movie. Lon and Lynette's are also menaces. Obviously, they did some pretty horrible things. And the only other note I think I have with the characters is I thought that the whole romance subplot between Joe and the Queen was okay when I was like 15, but as an adult, I just found myself groaning when he's like, "You've been wearing black for far too long." Like, that was the corniest thing I've ever heard, and it was so inappropriate, and like, I just find it very unrealistic that somebody's bodyguard would be, that it would be appropriate in the workplace relationship like that to just casually start dating. So, but I like Joe's relationship with Mia. I think it's done really well. And he's kind of this wise sage like character for her, but I think his relationship with the Queen is a little lackluster, and I think it's a little heavy-handed. I don't think we need it for the movie. And I think it's a little heavy-handed. It's like we're trying to put too many romances in here because we can't just have a film without romance. But overall, I think that Anne Hathaway and Julie Andrews 100% carry this film, and I think that's the biggest reason that it works as well as it does. And the fact that all of the other characters, even though they're menaces, I think that they are so believable that I believe that they're real people coming from real motivations, even if I think objectively when you kind of dig into it, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. But that's why I give it half credit, so 1.5 out of 3.
Okay. For me, for characters out of 3 points, I went with 2 points out of 3. I kind of want to start with the negatives just to get them out of the way. Well, with the same caveat that you gave at the beginning. The casting and acting is just perfection, so everything I say that's negative is not a reflection on those things. It is simply just how the characters are written. But the classmates, I feel like you could have replaced Lana, her friends, Josh, maybe Jeremiah, probably, maybe Michael, maybe not Lily. But you could replace all of them with cardboard cutouts and get almost the same effect. So they are so flat and so stereotypical that you can almost predict the next line they're going to say.
It's so true.
Not only can you predict their motivations and how it's going to turn out and how Mia's relationship with them is going to turn out. It's not like Josh had some sort of like big redemptive arc we didn't see coming where he was like, you know what? I am trash and I treated you poorly and we never get any of that, you know.
Well, we don't need it.
We don't. But I'm just saying, like, it's just so predictable. It's not like anybody of those characters does anything that just surprises us, you know, that makes us go, oh, okay, like that was out of character, because everybody is so committed to the stereotype that they are given that while they pull it off, like they're nailing it, but there's nothing, they don't go anywhere. You know what I mean? They're just there. One weird question I have is, it's established that Mia is very clumsy. Okay, very clumsy. She's very bad at sports, but she's fantastic at rock climbing, and she lists horseback riding, and I think something like synchronized swimming.
Yes, she does.
And I'm thinking to myself,
yoga.
I'm thinking to myself, those require
a lot
of your body.
Coordination.
And so how come you are coordinated in those ways and you can't, like,
block a soccer ball from a goal?
Soccer ball, or throw a soccer ball and not beam your coach in the head, which I think is a funny scene.
Baseball,
whatever. I think it's a funny scene, but it doesn't make any sense to me because, sure, there are gonna be people in this world. There are very athletic people that are good at some sports and not good at others, but I think if you have any level of athleticism, you're not going to be a hazard in other sports, which they make it out to be like she's just a hazard when she touches any sport that's not these weird specific 4 things that do require much from your body. And so I'm like, are they trying to say that these sports are not sporty? Because they definitely are. If you've tried any of them, you would know. I can't climb a rock wall. Are you telling me she can't catch a soccer ball, but she can pull herself up a rock face?
Well, I feel like maybe this is getting in the weeds, but maybe they're trying to say she doesn't have good, like, reflexes.
Maybe
so she can't like respond quickly enough.
Maybe.
But I feel like for horseback riding, you have to have some pretty good responses.
Reflexes.
Response time.
Unless you just have, like, the sleepiest horse known to man.
Maybe her, like, horseback riding was just, like, trail riding.
Maybe. Anyway, I just thought that was a weird inconsistency with Mia's character that I didn't fully buy. Okay, here's the question. Okay, I'm going to pose a question about Lily.
Okay.
Is Lily actually any better? She's more fleshed out, but is she actually any better than Lana and her friends? Let me give some examples, and then we can discuss.
Okay.
Number 1, Lily may be extreme in her personality. I'm not necessarily saying that is the reason that she is maybe no better toward Mia than Lana and her friends. However, she has very little regard for Mia's privacy. She basically threatens to end their friendship if Mia does not tell Lily at that moment on the way to school exactly what is going on, instead of being like, hey, I can tell there's something going on. I'm here for you if you would like to talk about that. And if you don't, just know I'm here for you anyway. She literally says, if you do not stop what you're doing right now and tell me exactly what's going on in full honesty and transparency, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. And I'm like, sheesh. Okay, another thing. As soon as she finds out that Mia is a princess, her first thing is like, I don't know what to say. And then her second thing is, will you come on my cable show? Because all of a sudden, now Mia is clout. And it self-serves Lily to put her on her stupid cable show that only reaches 12 people.
She doesn't know that.
She doesn't know that yet. But that, it's not. So I watch this and I feel like Lily may not be any better than Lana and her friends, because Lana and her friends suddenly becomes Mia's friend to the press when they can get clout out of that. And as soon as Lily finds out, she thinks that it's super great and she wants Mia on her cable show. And then she has a conversation with, after Mia bails on her, then they have a conversation later where she says, I want you to be a princess because you can affect change, which is a true thing to say, that she can affect change by being a princess. And it's one of the things that then Mia references later. So it does make a little bit of a difference in the plot. But the beginning of that was, I want you to be a princess. Why is this about you, Lily? It's not about you. Why? And so, in my opinion, if you have a different one, let me know. But in my opinion, Lily is just as self-serving as Lana and her friends. There, I said it.
It's because she's a menace.
Yep, she's a menace.
She also, the only conversations we see between her and Mia are also her asking Mia to join whatever, like, cause of the week or protest of the week she's doing. And then Mia tells her, like, when they're in chorus or whatever, she's like, I can't go to your protest or whatever. I'm meeting with my grandma, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, in addition to all of that, apparently the only prior existing things that they did was what
Lily
wanted her to do.
And Lily is so critical and kind of mean to her
She's
through
pretty
a
mean.
lot of the thing. Like the moment, like after
when she gets her hair,
or whatever, and she opens the thing, and both Michael and Lily are like Michael's like
surprised,
and then Lily is like, who destroyed you? And she just like lights into her, and I'm thinking to myself, that is so mean. Like genuinely, like Mia looks pretty. And it doesn't really matter the reason why she did these things. If Mia, as a 15-year-old girl, decides she wants to try straightening her hair today and trying on a little bit of eyeliner and mascara, like, why is your friend treating you like trash for that? It's not like Mia's trying to go to school with like her cleavage out or something like that would warrant like actual like what is going on with you concern as a 15-year-old. But like, why? Lily has no reason to be as nasty to her. This bag, you have one of these bags? We could hawk that and feed a whole third world country. And it's just like, why? Like, what's your reason for this? Because
she's just jealous.
She's jealous and she's mean and she's a menace, like you said. And it's just, I look at that friendship and I think to myself, why would you want to be friends with somebody who just spends their entire time critiquing you and every decision you make?
But I feel like it's pretty accurate.
It may be, but but my argument is that Lily is no better than Lana and her friends. At least Lana and her friends are posed as the mean girls who critique and make fun and bully Mia. But Lily does a lot of the same behavior. But because she's friends with Mia, we accept it as an audience. And I just think it's bad news. I just think it's bad news. Anyway, enough on Mia. I think Clarice is super interesting. And I think that she has these moments, and they're very brief in the movie, but I think they make me so interested in Clarice's past and Clarice's younger self. So let me give a few examples. And I just think they're just really nice little nuggets. So when she tells Mia that she's a princess, she says, I am royal by marriage. You are royal by blood. And it's the first time that my brain goes, I wonder what challenges Clarice had to face easing into royal life. Was it a hard transition for her? Was it an easy transition for her? Did she expect it in her life one day? Was it an arranged marriage? It opens just like a canvas of like curiosity, I think, about Clarice, and I think it's really lovely. Another example is after the dinner scene when Mia has had a very clumsy dinner. And she comes in and she's like, you're not mad about what happened? And she's like, no, I actually found it very funny. It reminded me of my first royal dinner where I knocked over a suit of armor and the spear went through the suckling pig. And she chuckles to herself. And it gives you a little depiction of like, she is more than just this stiff, like, responsible ruler. Like, she also had growth to do in her youth, and it's these moments of lovely connection that she makes with Mia outside of just the now, and I think she shares these little tidbits about herself, and so I just think that Clarice is just a very interesting character, and she gives us just these lovely, almost like snapshots into like peeks into her past that I think kind of fuel a curiosity about her. That don't necessarily need to be answered for the sake of the plot, but they help us just remember that like Clarice also has a lifetime of knowledge and experience that, you know, we haven't gotten to see, but have made her into the person that she is today, which is very layered. And Julie Andrews just plays her in such that believable way. I also really think the scene is very funny when the brake goes out in Mia's car and it smashes into the trolley, and to get out of the ticket, she like knights the police officer and the trolley driver, and I just think it's such a funny scene. And again, it just kind of shows that, like, you know, Clarice may have her rules or whatever, but she's like softening toward the idea of being a grandmother, so she's trying to do this thing for her granddaughter, and it's just so fun. I just think those sorts of scenes are so fun.
Well, and then those two guys are at like the coronation or whatever,
or not the ball
coronation
or whatever.
Yeah, the ball at the end.
So I agree with you completely about Helen. When I was a kid and watched this movie, I remember being like, Mia's being kind of mean to her mom. And now I'm like, you know what? She got it justified, because there could have been arrangements made. Mm-hmm. And I think, sure, it wouldn't have, like, we would have had no story. Like, this movie wouldn't exist if they had made, like, actual smart, like, custody arrangements. So, sure, whatever. But I think if we were just realistically talking about Helen, she is kind of selfish. And I think she continues to stay selfish through some of this movie, in the fact that a whole plot scene or a whole scene is revolving around the fact that Helen goes into a parent-teacher conference and walks out with a date.
Yes, I wrote that too. I forgot to mention it.
And Mia is upset about it, and I think that that's justified.
That's 100%
She's like,
valid.
You literally can't go into a parent-teacher conference and just talk about me. You had to make it about yourself.
Right.
Mia doesn't say that to her mother.
But
that's what happens.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Helen, please. And she's like, I haven't met a nice man in so long. Well, then get out your dang house. Quit painting.
You could have had a literal prince.
Literally. Anyway, so yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Helen. I think Joe is an MVP character.
He is an MVP character.
I think he is such a pillar to both Clarice and Mia. And I think, while normally I would go at characters that have to mediate between characters, I think the way that Joe mediates throughout this whole story is in such a understated, unobtrusive way that I really like the way that he does. And there are multiple times where he speaks to Mia on behalf of Clarice, not on behalf of, but like with a perspective to kind of maybe soften Mia towards something Clarice has done or said, or that she's nervous about the expectations from Clarice. And then he does the same thing on the opposite side. He speaks to Clarice and says, you know, I don't think you were too tough on her as a queen, but I do think you were too tough on her as a grandmother. And he goes up to bat for both of them equally. And it's just done with such fairness, but he never does it in a way where it's like, you need to listen to what I have to say,
right?
You know, either,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he just offers in his quiet way. And I think that strength is something that both Mia and Clarice rely on. And I think that he realizes their reliance on them, and he does not use that in any sort of manipulative way. He just realizes that he has a responsibility now to both of them and wishes to do the best by both of them. And I just think that the depiction of that is just really nice. And I think Joe could have easily become a throwaway character, kind of in the way that like Charlotte is a character. She shows up, she does her job, she's in quite a few scenes, but she's at the end of it all. She doesn't serve a purpose in the overall like growth of our main characters the way that Joe does. I think Joe has a hand way more. He's just the voice of reason, that I think is very important. And it's just, like I said, it's just never done in a way where you're like, oh, another lecture or anything like that. And he's also just very observant. He sees how Mia is upset by Lily in the back of the limo. He notices stuff like that. And I just think that's really good. Fun fact, and then I'll be done. This is simply a fun fact. So the guy that plays Michael is a musician, and that is his band in the movie, and it was a band that was kind of popular in the 2000s. The band is Rooney, and they actually do the main in credits title track of the Nancy Drew 2007 movie. Isn't that a fun fact?
What a fun fact.
Yeah. So I just thought that was fun because when I was younger, I didn't know that. It wasn't until I was older that I learned that, oh, that was Rooney and playing in Doc Shop or whatever. That's flying away now. So 2 points out of 3 for characters for me.
Alrighty. So our next category is aesthetics. Out of a total possible score of 2, I gave this 1.5 points out of 2. Kind of my summary statement, if you will, is I wrote that for a lower tier plot, which I would say that this film's plot, compared to all of the movie plots in the world, is kind of a lower tier in its fact that it's simple. It takes itself seriously as a film, and I think it shows that this film was crafted with love. I kind of mentioned that at the beginning, and I think that the people that made this film from a technical and a visual standpoint did it with passion and like quote, it was quote unquote made with love. And I think that that's reflected in the visuals of the film. So I'll kind of go into things a little bit. The first thing I noticed kind of in the beginning of the film is we're given multiple locations in this film. We go from the firehouse of Mia's house to the school to a rock climbing gym to outside the street at Mia's house to the Genovian consulate to inside the Genovian. I mean, we go through
to the garage.
Yeah. We go to so many different sets, and all of these sets feel like they're on the same stretch of town as each other. Sure. They feel very cohesive. I think San Francisco as the setting of the town is a really interesting choice. For a location, I think it adds to some really good visuals of the film. In the sense it's not set in New York City. It's not set in some tiny little farm town. And I think that choosing that as a location is a pretty good setting, and it helps kind of pull the story all together and kind of makes the characters feel like they are part of the same world, and all of the settings feel like sets and places that all of these characters would go to in their just normal day-to-day life. The sets and the set design of this film, I think overall are just done really well. Everything feels like it's lived in, like people really do like use this space for their own purposes, kind of contrasting to what we talked about in a prior episode about Avatar, The Last Airbender from Netflix. Everything feels like it belongs to these people. Go ahead, what you got?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I just looked up the filming locations just to see, and it looks like they went to the UK for the overhead castle shot, but Mia's home was in San Francisco, so was Grove High School, and the Genovian consulate was in Los Angeles. But then, of course, they went to the Golden Gate Bridge and Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco. So a majority of the movie was
filmed on location,
filmed in San Francisco.
Nice. Little details like with things feeling lived in, I wrote like the tie-dye trash cans, the fact that Mia's mom's an artist and their trash cans are painted tie-dye, and just these little visual moments where like Mia's putting the trash in their like tie-dye painted trash cans, and their neighbors are just like very bland looking, you know. And so just little moments like that where I feel like from a film standpoint, most of your audience are not going to even know that you didn't take the time to paint those trash cans, but it mattered to the people that made this film to include little details like that. And so those kinds of moments
adds to a level of believability,
right?
Too. Even if you don't consciously like take note of it, I think inwardly it just helps you buy it faster,
right? And so those are the kinds of moments where I feel like this film was just very intentionally put together. I don't have a lot of notes as far as like cinematography goes, but I did notice that there are some parts in kind of the like princess lesson montage where it looked the film quality looks a little different, and so those cuts between the two, it looks like they were either filmed on different days or the lighting's different. That you can see in the limo, there's actual film grain is present on that, so it was shot on actual film. And so there's moments where I think today you could call it a critique, but in the world of film, that was part of the industry. Like that just was part of the nature of creating a film and filming on actual film versus filming digitally. So I did notice some of those things, but I don't think it's necessarily like a negative, because that's just the way movies were made on actual film. But I did notice it, so I wrote it down. Some of the daydream sequences though with Josh, and just so corny. Like they're just so corny. And when she she thinks her foot's gonna pop and it gets stuck in gum, like stuff like that, I was just like, this is just, there's lots of cheese. It's just really cheesy. The makeover montage, I feel like at this point it's kind of become iconic, but I think it also, in one sense, has also become very stereotypical, just kind of a trope. Like every chick flick now has some kind of makeover montage. The only part of that montage that I thought was kind of like goofy and pointless was they kept shooting, like cutting back to like the bottom of the chair spinning around as like time's passing or something, and I was just like, it's just a little too much, like too overdone, like too, I guess, heavy-handed for lack of better terms. The costumes are a bit dated, but overall I think it's really consistent and it tells the story very well. I think that the queen, the way that her outfits are designed are just very classic. I think it was interesting that they decided to set the school as like a private school, so all the kids are in school uniforms. I always think it's interesting when people do that as I don't know if that was from the book or not, but I do think
I don't recall.
It makes for interesting costumes when students at private schools like that are allowed to make certain modifications to their wardrobe to kind of reflect their own personality without breaking the dress code. So it's interesting that they even made some decisions like that in some of the characters' costume pieces. You know, something like obviously like Lily's hair or things like that.
Jeremiah wears like a sweater at some point.
Yeah.
It's like a conversation topic or something.
Right. So it's an interesting, like even things like that, you could have just put all of these kids in the same uniform that all looked like they just came off the rack yesterday, and they took a lot of care to make these costumes this individual's piece. And so this is what your character would wear, and so that's what you're going to be wearing today, instead of just giving them all the same clothes off the rack. Otherwise, some fashion style is going to seem, like it's from 2001, because it was. The soundtrack overall, I think, is pretty good in this film. I think it's very much a product of its time. It's very classic to the early 2000s. So whether you like it or don't like it, I don't think it's a negative objectively to the film, because I think it fits the feel of this movie. I don't think there's any parts where like a song from the soundtrack comes on and you're kind of like pulled out of the moment because feels like it fits. And likewise, the score feels very organic to the film. It fits the right tone as well. It moves the story forward versus being a distraction from the story. Some of the sound design, I noticed some of the sound at the piers, specifically when they're arm wrestling. I feel like there was a little bit of discrepancies, if you will, in some of the way the audio's coming through. I just noticed it pretty quickly because it was in the opening of the film when Mia is up in her room and then she comes down the fire pole and then is like down on the floor of the firehouse. When she's in her room, she has her glasses on. When she slides down the fire pole, she has no glasses on. And then when she's back on the floor, she has her glasses on again. And for me,
I didn't notice.
I don't look for moments like that because I'm not that nitpicky when it comes to scoring things for our podcast. But I was like, wow, I feel like if I noticed it, it had to be really obvious. The only other couple things I noticed that were just a little like I guess the most of the like negatives, if you will, that I have visually of this film are just parts where it felt like it was just too much. It was just overplayed or heavy-handed. I know I've kind of already said the foot pop at the end when Michael and Mia are in the garden. I thought that was really cheesy. I think I probably liked it when I was 15, but like now I'm like, okay, that's really corny. But I will say all those lights that come on in the garden are so impressive. Somebody did a lot of work putting all of those out there. But then also, why were these not already turned on? Why was the big switch
I have a
not
theory.
flipped on?
I have a theory.
Okay.
Should I say it now or address it when I'm in aesthetics?
It's up to you.
I'll save my theory.
Okay, save your theory. The other moments were when they were at the beach party and Mia and Josh are in like the shack of some kind, which what is that and how'd they get in? I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit of a plot hole. But the photographers and paparazzi that are outside, and there's the one photographer that's literally holding grass in his hand.
I'm like, when did you have time to do this, bro?
And he's just standing up holding grass, and I'm like, okay, they're just gonna like play it for laughs, like it's just a thing, because like he was hiding behind like some seagrass or something. No, he's continuing to hold grass while he's standing up with his camera like that. I was like, dude, come on, like this is too much. It's just too much. Like it's just going past funny all the way to hokey. And so I feel like there's quite a few moments in the film where I think visually we've just gone past funny and now we've gone a little too far into like hokey or corny zone. One thing I did think was really done well, and I with cinematography, I'm not in like a film expert, but I thought the scene where Mia and Lily are throwing the basketball and they're having kind of they're having it out with each other and apologizing, and they kind of make up and are friends again. All of the framing between the two of them in that whole scene while they're playing basketball, I was very impressed that we never lost sight of the comedic aspect of the fact that them throwing a basketball adds a little bit of levity to the moment. We never lose that, but yet we still get all of the important moments between Mia and Lily are caught on stage, and it's like we're able to see their expressions and see their body language fully, and yet we still are able to kind of follow what's going on. And I feel like scenes like that have got to be so hard to film because you've got so much movement and so many moving pieces, and you have to set the cameras up so many times.
Yeah, I'm sure it's difficult because not only do you have, like you said, all of the movement with different angles of the faces of your two actors, but if you try to control it too much, then you risk losing the believability of because there is tension and anger there in the beginning, and you don't want to lose any of that performance because they're thinking too hard about where they're standing and how they're,
what angle they have to throw the basketball.
And you have the risk of them just like not catching the shot or whatever too. Like you have those risks. So it had to be, I imagine that scene took a while.
Yeah.
So
I felt like there was this great balance where none of that, we never lost the tone of the scene. It never got too intense or too dramatic. And yet it didn't feel like they weren't having a genuine conversation because we're laughing at them throwing a basketball around or that it was too light or too flippant. And yet it also it didn't feel choreographed or stunt controlled.
Right.
In the sense that now the actors aren't able to focus, like you said, on what they're saying because they're too busy worrying about choreography or blocking or getting in the camera shots and things like that. So that specifically, as I was watching it this time to review this podcast episode, I was like, I'm very impressed with how well this like whole scene is going and how it was shot and framed and everything. So that I thought specifically was really impressive. But in general, I think that there are quite a few parts that are just a little hokey and corny and like visually There are a couple moments where I think the editing is a little bit choppy, but I think that's probably, it was specifically in some of the scenes where maybe the film, like the quality of the literal film itself it was filmed on may not have been like ideal, or it may not have been like, I don't know, in, you know, the exposure process or whatever with the film, maybe something kind of went a little awry. So again, that just kind of comes with that medium that you're using. So I can't, you know, put a lot of fault on it, but those were the scenes where I noticed maybe the editing was a little bit choppy, or like maybe they really literally lost a piece of the film and they had to kind of fix what they had versus reshooting the whole scene. So 1.5 points out of 2.
Okay. For me, for aesthetics, I also gave this 1.5 points out of 2. I have said this before, and I'm going to say it again. Effective cinematography for effective storytelling does not have to be flashy. You need to know what kind of movie you're shooting. If they had shot the Princess Diaries like it was the Avengers, it would not have gone. Like, the things do not go together. It wouldn't have been appropriate cinematography. You don't film the Princess Diaries like you would film Hairspray. Like, they're different things, and you need to know what you are trying to accomplish before you try to throw bells and whistles into the mix. Bells and whistles go great with an action movie because you're already tracking action. You can do all sorts of things with your cinematography, but we don't need that, nor is it appropriate to include all of those sorts of things in a movie like this. So it's not flashy. The cinematography is not flashy. They don't do anything weird, unusual. There is no weird angles. There's no fast movement. There's no slow-mo. There's nothing like that because it doesn't need any of that. The purpose of your camera is the lens with which you are telling the story. And if you are effectively telling your story with by the book cinematography, then stick with it. It's good. And not only is it good, but a lot of the shots are really beautiful. They have these wonderfully beautiful establishing shots of San Francisco at sunset and Fisherman's Wharf and things like that. They do. I'm not going to say that like because it's not flashy, it's not nice to look at. It is. It's nice to look at. But I don't come in here with the opinion that like they should have done more because I don't necessarily think that's true. I don't think they should have done more. I think that this movie they do at least 2, maybe 3 montage type scenes. I do think by the time we get to the third one, it feels a little bit stale. So that is a complaint that I have. But I do think that overall, it's not so tiresome that it becomes a big complaint. Plus, I think if you were just casually watching this, you probably wouldn't even register that we're doing another montage unless you think the way that like I tend to, which is I feel so split about montages a lot of the time. I think they can be lazy storytelling. I think thankfully in the case of the Princess Diaries, I don't feel that way. I don't necessarily feel like they're cutting out important story moments. I think it's used more like we're going to fast forward through something that could take too much time instead of let me give you quick teasers of like a flashback that maybe we could have expounded on. So I think that it's the kind of montage that I accept better. But the fact that they have at least 2, maybe 3 just feels like a little bit too much. Like, could we have tried something different by the time we get to the end of the last montage? I think that the use of the soundtrack is very good. And one thing I really appreciate about the editors is that they use the use of the soundtrack as edit points a lot of the time. They will edit points on downbeats or percussion moments. They also use motion or some other sound effects or even dialogue are timed to the beat or cadence or flow of whatever song is playing. And I think it's really good. Probably the most noticeable example of this is a song starts. This is after everybody at school knows that Mia is a princess, okay? And there's the scene where Josh is going to ask Mia to the Baker beach party. And Mia is at her locker. And we see Josh walk to his locker, pick it up. He grabs a bottle of, I guess, hair gel or something. And he flips it. And he goes, pow, pow, in his hand. And it is literally on the drum, like, the cymbal beat in the song, and it pow pow at the same exact moment. I don't know if that was planned or if it was a happy coincidence, but it was really satisfying to me. Do I think the scene is great? No, not really. Like, it's dumb. But that editing moment was just so nice. And that's just one example of like a handful that I found throughout the course of the movie. And I love using the music as sort of this like auditory, like not crutch, but like help to something that you're visually seeing, but the two are not related. And I just think that kind of thing is very creative. And so again, it's not flashy, but it's creative. It's out of the box, you know, that sort of thing. I like that kind of thing. The end scene, so the foot pop and kiss that she gets at the end with Michael and the lights. And you said, why were the lights not on? Okay. This is me maybe throwing mud at the wall. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm headcanoning too much. I look at that. I watched it and I thought to myself, maybe this is a really nice visual parallel of the idea, and we've heard this phrase before, of sparks flying. Sparks fly and the lights go on. And maybe I'm thinking too deep.
No, I think that's like metaphorically why they had the lights turn on.
So that's the answer to your question.
No,
why were
but
the lights
I mean,
not already
why?
on? Because then they couldn't do that.
No, I mean, why did literally nobody turn the lights on?
I don't know about that. But I meant
that was my question.
Oh, okay. I thought you were asking like, why were they not on? It was like, obviously they were not on that they could do this.
They could have a moment, obviously.
Yeah. So I like the moment. It's a very cutesy little aesthetic parallel. I understand you don't really care for the moment. I think it's cute. I thought it was cute when I was young. I still think it's cute. Is it cheesy? Is it corny? Yes. I still think it's cute. I'm going to take it. It's fine. I also want to talk about another negative, which is they do this thing sometimes where it's like a crowd scene and you're hearing people talk and you're not seeing people talk. Mm-hmm. And you can tell that it's not being recorded.
It's ADR.
It's ADR, and it's done multiple times. So, and like at the beach party when the like helicopter comes down,
my dad thinks I'm a princess.
Yeah. And it's like those ADR moments that happen handfuls of times.
Yeah. Doesn't it happen also when they're in the school and both the scenes when they're in the classroom? One, when Mia's about to throw up, and then also when she takes her hat off. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's all ADR too.
Yeah. But it's definitely gotta be. It's not recorded naturally in the scene. And I personally don't know if I hold the opinion that those lines that they ADR in add anything to the storytelling anyway. Mm. So I think they should have just gone without and just used the naturally recorded dialogue that was written in the script or whatever. And if those lines are written in the script, then you record them on set. Even if you just pull some random, you want a voice we're not familiar with, you got crew members, you got all these extras sitting on the beach. Pick one. Be like, hey, I just need you to record this line into this microphone. We don't even have to see them, but at least then you've got the same room tone and ambience that all your other lines in this scene have, so it matches audibly.
Right.
So that was a big problem that I had. Costumes, I agree. They are dated, but it's 2001. They are very appropriate to the time. And some of those fashions are coming back into style because fashions always come back into style eventually. But I do think it's nice to note, like you kind of mentioned, that like Clarice wears very timeless outfits. And I think that is kind of indicative to her status as well. As her money, where characters like Mia, when she's not in her school uniform, wear very 2001 teenager outfits, and it's just how it is. The hairstyles are very indicative to the time too.
Even Mia's makeup with the makeover stuff.
Yep, Mia's makeup is not it's not the look anymore. I still think it looks nice, but it's not the look anymore. But the hair especially with like the guys' hairstyles, like Josh and Michael, like they literally look like every other boy did in 2001. So, those things, while done well, they, don't hold up necessarily when you try to introduce a new audience to a movie like this. One thing I'll say though, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they used a green screen or CGI at all in this movie. And I'm happy for it. I don't want it to frame it like it's a negative.
Yeah.
But I think everything we see was there as it's presented to you in camera.
Yeah.
I think that's exact, and I am for that.
Yeah.
I'm not a CGI hater, but I do hold the opinion that CGI is sometimes used unnecessarily or in poor ways. And I cannot recall any moment where I was like, that's not real. That's not real. That's a green screen. That's CGI. And so I commend them for taking the time to dress every set, go to every location, and film whatever it is that they had to film there.
I just realized I forgot my biggest critique with aesthetics. No. I left it out.
Okay, go ahead.
It's Mia's hair is so frizzy like that at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Her hair looks like that. It's like a mane. Mm-hmm. And then she gets it straightened or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then when it pours down rain,
it doesn't frizz back
up again. Wet, it doesn't frizz back up again.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a good point.
Anybody with curly hair knows.
Yeah, sometimes I'll straighten my hair and it's not even raining. It's just humid outside. And it's like, it starts to look like this again.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I just think overall it's very good. It's just not perfect. So 1.5 points out of 2 for aesthetics.
Okay, so next category is personal taste and preference. Always, we're only allowed 2 points for this category. So I gave this 1 out of 2 points. This movie for me is a big ball of cheese. It's extremely predictable, and it's a great movie to watch when you're sick or recovering from surgery. I have done that. It's nice. I do really enjoy watching Julie Andrews and Anne Hathaway, and they both really carry the movie. And I think their performances make the film iconic. It's not a movie I necessarily watch regularly, but honestly, it's a good time. So I would say it's not one that I would like put on repeat. I think I watched it. I don't know. I feel like I watched it here and there when I was in like middle school, high school, college. And then I just stopped watching it. But I will say, I think the last surgery I had, I put it on. I watched the first and the second one just back to back. And it was really relaxing.
It was a really nice time. Yeah.
It was just a good time. Fun time. It is what it is. I think that's kind of the best statement, which is a complete cliche, but it sets you up for like this pretty predictable, heartfelt, good, feel good movie, and it delivers. Yeah. So it's not my favorite movie of all time, but 1 out of 2.
Okay. For me, for personal taste and preference out of 2, I gave it 1.5 points. There's a lot of nostalgia for me in this movie. And it's genuinely like a cozy, familiar favorite. It is one that I revisit, I wouldn't say all the time, but often enough. It's one that I remember very well. I've watched often enough to know so much of the dialogue. And even like the score, like sometimes can play in my head unprovoked, and I just remember it. It's not a constant rewatch, but it is a very happy one. and I genuinely don't have any complaints. I didn't give it full points because I think there are many other things that I like more. But I didn't, this is kind of the category where it's like anything goes. So I kind of just wanted to be like honest about that. So, while it's not something that I'm like, if somebody's like, oh, what's your favorite Disney film from the 2000s? It's not going to be this one. But, do I have any complaints about this one? Not really. I mean, obviously I have complaints. I mentioned them. But overall, I think that this is one that's like, it's easy to watch. It's genuinely just a fun time. It's a happy time. It does not require brain work. You're not having to try to follow things. It's not one of those things where it's like, if you miss 5 minutes of dialogue, that it just like completely ruins your understanding of what's happening. It's not like that. So like you said, it gives you the expectation in the beginning and it completely delivers. And I don't care that I didn't get plot twisted. I don't always need a plot twist.
Right.
So 1.5 points out of 2.
Cool. Last category, as always, is creativity. Out of a total possible score of 1, I give this full points for creativity. One aspect of creativity that we like to cover is whether or not something has become kind of a milestone piece of media or has become iconic, whether in its respective field or just across the board. I would say that this film in a lot of ways has become iconic, or it has at least has many iconic moments in it that I think is still are still referenced today. But the biggest reason that I gave this full points is in today's media trends, I think we have, in a sense, lost our way when it comes to what young girls want and what they dream of. Sure, we can have stories of strong, brave warrior women like Mulan, but there's nothing wrong with a classic princess story. Having a good story of a girl finding her way in the world and becoming the princess she was meant to be, and celebrating the strength and femininity of a young girl's dream come true is so rare. And I think this story does a good job and is still beloved by young girls for that reason. So,
wow, I think that's a really good point. I think sometimes we do kind of get lost and we always celebrate like the tough girl, and she's worth celebrating too, but I think there is strength in femininity that is often pushed aside or glossed over. And I think that's a really good point. That's a really good perspective, is just to kind of be like, it's okay if you just want to be a princess.
Right. And like,
that's all right.
And that the perspective of what it means to be a princess, Mia sums it up at the end. It's that so my thoughts and the thoughts of those smarter than me can become reality, and a sense in so many words, like affect positive change in the world. And that's really what governance should be. And so I think that it's okay to have a story and have girls enjoy a story of a girl that just, she turns out to be a princess.
Yeah.
Like that's
a good one.
And a good one. And that's a great story to have. And I think we've lost our way in modern media in the past, this was 2001. So as of recording this episode, 23 years. In the past 23 years, we don't have stories like this anymore for young girls. And I think it's needed because we've swung the pendulum so far to the other, where every young girl has to want to grow up to be a Jedi or a warrior. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, right. I was one of those girls growing up. But there's nothing wrong with a young girl whose dream come true would be to be a princess.
Right.
And so I think this movie does a great job of preserving that. And it fills that hole that I think we have in today's media. So full points for creativity.
Nice. For me, for creativity, I also gave this a full point. I completely agree with what you said. I think that this is a great adaptation and almost an improvement on the books from my recollection. I think it has lasting iconic influence. I have to give it to Gary Marshall and his team, because I genuinely think that Princess Diaries set the precedent and bar for what became an era of wholesome teen girl focused, like, comedy / romance, like feel good films. The 2000s were stuffed full of movies like this that came out after this, and a lot of them are formulaic like this, and I don't know if I'm speculating out my ears here, but it feels like if the Princess Diaries had not had the success, notoriety, and iconic status that it had, I don't know that the 2000s would have been filled with movies like this. I think people saw it and they said, people love this. I can make a movie like that. And do I think that a lot of them are samey? Yes, I do. And I think maybe the market toward the end of that era became a little oversaturated. Yes. But we cannot deny that I'm pretty sure this is it. This is what sparked the trend. And then we got Mean Girls, like you mentioned. I remember watching A Cinderella Story with Chad Michael Murray and Hilary Duff, which I think came out in like 2003, 2004. I watched that movie a gabillion times growing up. So movies like that were happening over and over and over. And I think it started here. I think this was it. This was the start right here. And like I said, I think Princess Diaries kind of set the bar of that, of like the feel good, don't have to think very hard, still having a good time, movie. So I think it deserves that credit for the creativity that it had. So with that, what is your overall final score?
My overall final score for The Princess Diaries is a 6 out of 10.
Okay, not terrible. And mine is a 7.5. So
I think 6 out of 10 is really good.
Yeah. I guess I don't know. I was thinking that my score was going to be lower than it was. So I guess by proxy, I thought maybe yours would be lower. So
I think 6 and 7.5 out of 10. Those are pretty good. Solid scores.
Those are good. Yeah. Still over average.
It is. It is.
So, anything else you want to talk about before we go into lightning round?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't think so. Oh, another thing I mentioned in aesthetics that I forgot to mention was when Mia slides into home plate. Mm-hmm. No one should ever slide into home plate like this. With your arm, the road rash she would get on her arm.
True.
I cannot imagine.
Ow.
Yeah. Don't ever do that. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't slide into home plate like that.
Not like that. Not in a t-shirt. Wear long sleeves or something. But still. Gonna be painful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's it.
All right. My lightning round questions are pretty easy today.
Go for it.
Who's your favorite character?
Julie Andrews.
Julie Andrews is not a character.
Yes, she is. She is an icon.
Clarice is the character. Thanks very much.
I think it would still be her.
Yeah. So. I agree. Clarice is the queen in all ways. Least favorite character.
There's so many menaces to choose from. I think Mia's mom.
Okay.
I think Mia's mom.
Mine is Lily.
Lily's pretty bad.
Sorry.
But I can excuse her because she's 15.
I guess so.
Mia's mom has no excuse.
I think I'm generally annoyed every time Lily opened her mouth. So I think it was just harder for me.
I do think it's hilarious that her cable show is named Shut Up and Listen. It's so on brand for her.
It's very on brand.
So on brand. We should rename our podcast to Shut Up and Listen.
I would feel bad about it.
I wonder if somebody has...
Would you think that's funny?
I would think it's hilarious.
I would feel bad.
Well, we were telling people to shut up and listen to us? Yeah. I think it'd be hilarious. I bet there is a podcast out there called Shut Up and Listen. So...
And the host name is Lily.
It's Lily Moskovitz. I had a friend. Oh my gosh, this is a sidetrack. I had a friend growing up who had a hamster, and she named the hamster Lily Moskovitz. So the hamster was named Lily.
Lily Moskovitz.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Okay.
I think it was like one of the little like dwarf hamsters, so it looked more like a mouse.
That's funny.
Instead of like the big like guinea pig looking hamsters. Okay, next question.
Okay, favorite scene.
Ooh. Let me look at my notes if I wrote anything down. I don't know. That's a tough one. I think story-wise, that's a tough one.
If you want me to give my answer.
Yeah, go ahead. Is it the trolley?
No.
Oh, okay.
My favorite scene, and it is kind of story-wise, but also very character-wise, is the scene where Clarice comes to talk to Mia one more time before the ball. Mm-hmm. And they're at Mia's house, and Mia is about to do her yoga or whatever. And Clarice says something like, well, I believe in you, kind of thing. And then she turns to leave. And Mia says, Grandma. And she turns around. She doesn't call her Queen Clarice or anything like that. She calls her Grandma. And she turns around and she says, I'm sorry again about everything. And Clarice just goes, oh, my darling. And she walks up to her and they just embrace. And I get choked up every time because I think it's so good. And it's like they're not saying much, It's not like it's huge expositions between the two of them, but it's just this beautiful little moment between them as grandmother and granddaughter. And they hug and they embrace. And it just kind of feels like even if Mia does not accept the role of princess, it's like their relationship is okay. Their relationship is intact. And so like it just feels good as a watcher. So that's my favorite scene.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. That's a really good one. I also like the scene where I mean I like a lot of the really funny moments. I like when Clarice comes to Mia's house and she like wipes the coffee cup and like wipes the thing table, and the table, and I think that's funny. Mm-hmm. And I always thought it was funny when Julie Andrews is like, goodbye trolley people. There's like little moments like that where I feel like Julie Andrews is just golden. I think also a lot of the story moments with Joe and Mia I really like because he's so he kind of takes on this in a way like a father figure to her. I think watching it this time, my favorite scene that was just I'd never understood the weight of it the way I did in having to like think through this movie critically was when right before the ball when Mia is on the bleachers and she's telling Joe like, how do I even know if I'm ready? And he says to her like, she thinks you're ready, meaning her grandmother, like she thinks you're ready for this. And he basically encourages her, the only way you're gonna know is just by simply trying for it and just simply giving it a try. And so I thought that was just, it's such a good like life lesson in a way. It's like, how do you ever know you're ready for anything?
Yeah, a lot of those scenes are really, really nice. I think because Joe has like such a like gentle way about him. He's not in any way like weak or a pushover, but he's just very gentle with Mia. And I think that's what she needs is kind of like that gentle strength, that gentle push. And she gets that delivered to her often through him. So
yeah. And even the scene where Lily just like eviscerates her in the back of the limo while somebody's giving you a ride to school too. Know. Like how
Lily
rude.
Sucks.
She's a menace.
She sucks.
And he says to her, he quotes Eleanor Roosevelt to her and says, no one can make you inferior without your consent. And but before that he's like, was my mirror fogging up or were there tears? He's very just like you said,
tactful. He's very tactful, man.
He's very gentle about it, but he's very, it also works very well because he doesn't have any stake in the game. Like if Mia is or isn't princess, like it makes no difference to him. He still has his job, Right. So.
Okay. Next question. If the movie was remade today, any casting choices?
Oh, goodness. Do not ever remake this movie.
Yes, we're not saying we want that. We don't. This is sacred ground. Please don't touch it.
If you remake this movie and you don't recast Julie Andrews,
we're going to review it and we're going to give it negative points.
Yeah.
Take that.
Golly, I'm getting so old. I don't know any of like the new
I know
actors or actresses that are out there and are really trendy. You know who's kind of climbing on the scene now, who might be interesting is Joe. It'd be very different. Glenn Powell.
Okay.
Might be interesting.
Okay, who's another popular actor? I just came up with one.
Go for it.
Josh Bryant, played by Timothy Chalamet.
No.
No?
He's way too old now.
I mean, dude, guy playing Josh Bryant was probably in his 20s.
True. How old is Timothy Chalamet?
Like 22 or 23.
He's that young?
I guess.
No, he's not.
I'm gonna Google him.
He's way older than that now. Gotta be.
I'm gonna Google him.
Trying to think
Oh,
of...
he's 28. I don't know nothing.
Yeah, you don't know nothing, Tori. I knew he was too old.
I don't know nothing.
It would be like a rendition of Grease all over again. I don't know. That's hard. I feel like you could put, I don't know if it would just be typecasting again, but Sadie Sink could be Lily.
Yeah, I could see that.
It'd be kind of typecasting though, because she plays a very similar character as Max.
Yeah.
I was gonna try and think of like who would now be like the grandmother queen kind of figure, you know?
It would this could be like a stretch, but it would be interesting to see her in a role because I think she doesn't often play the straight man. She's often like the comedian, but like Joan Cusack could be like an interesting take on Clarice. I'd be interested to see like how she
I don't know who that is.
Joan Cusack?
Yeah. Yeah, I do know who that is.
Don't
sorry.
you? She was in like
it took me a
Snickets.
minute. Yeah, no, sorry.
Okay.
It took me a minute to figure out. I was like, put the face to the name.
Yeah.
I was gonna say who in like several years, many years, I would like to see as the queen would be Zendaya.
Oh, that would be cool. I think she could definitely do that. Because, like, Clarice does have moments of humor.
Yeah.
And so Zendaya
I think she'd be very good at it.
Yeah, but she's very poised. She's a very poised lady.
I think she'd print very well for it. And then she's got the acting skills. She's
absolutely.
Great. I think she's very skilled. So, but she's obviously way too young for that now.
Right.
But I think she'd do very well.
Yeah. Okay. Those
so after we die, you can you can remake it.
Okay. Last question. If you were Mia, how would you react to news that you were royal and in line for a crown? Like, how do you think you would process that?
I mean, like at this stage in my life, or like if I was a teenager?
Either. You can answer how you wish.
I'll answer for myself now.
Okay.
I would, this is going to sound really bad, but I would probably just be thrilled that I wouldn't have to work a conventional job and I could have free health insurance. I mean, that's pretty bad, but like, be kind of nice. Like, could I pay off my student loans? Like,
yeah, I get
instantly, and I think financial stability would be pretty nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna also answer for myself right now. I'd be like, you're telling me I can make my own schedule and travel the world?
Well, I mean, it's not quite like that.
But like, you know what I mean? Like, I'd be given opportunities that I don't have access to right now.
Right.
And I'd be like, yeah, I'm okay with that. And like, just like the security of knowing that like, I'll always have a house to sleep in.
Yeah.
I'll always have food to eat, you know, unless my country just literally goes under, which would then be my fault. So it's like, I deserve it at that point.
No pressure.
So it's like, but you know, I definitely would just be like, okay, I think I'm good. Now, if I was 15, I think I'd probably be like, can my parents come with me? Can my whole family come? But
that would be an obvious yes, though.
Yeah. But I think, I don't know. I was a different kid than Mia was, and like I wasn't like terrified of people the way she was. Like I was introverted, but like I wasn't like terrified of everything. So I don't think it would have been a big deal for me. Maybe a little daunting, but I don't think I would have said no at all. Now I'd say yes, absolutely. Does anybody have a country they need me to take care of?
We're offering our services.
Yeah,
if you need your country to be governed.
Yeah.
And you need an heir.
Just call us.
Call us.
Anyway, okay, so that's all the questions. Anything else you want to say?
No.
All right. That's it. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode. Hope you had a good time. We know we did. If you have ideas of what we should review next, if there's like something hot or trending or your favorite thing that you want us to potentially eviscerate, don't blame us if that happens. You can just leave us a comment or use our suggestion box on lionandmousepodcast.com. That website is where you can also find links to show notes, Patreon, socials, those sorts of things. Please review this episode wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please do all the YouTube things. So the like, the comments, the subscribes, because it really does help expand our reach, and we can appreciate all that support. Thank you so much for listening. We will catch you in the next one.